Really? Assassin's Creed Valhalla patch 1.1.0 is out, and it introduced something that I look at and I go, hang on a minute, why is that there? XP booster pack. Yes, that's annoying. But also, there's a little thing that they've tweaked in the balancing of the game that makes it completely redundant, and it's hilarious. So let's talk about this, because honestly I think it's very shifty that they decided to introduce this kind of microtransaction after the reviews came out. And I'm going to talk about it and give my honest thoughts on it, because if it were out at the time of my review, this is something that I would have been criticising. I mean, on the whole, I quite enjoyed Valhalla, but I can't help but feel as if this sort of feature bastardizes the game to promote microtransactions. So, let's get into it, shall we? Under the balancing section of the patch notes, we learn that they have tweaked the NPC power level behaviour. NPC's power will now be at a maximum difference of 51 below the player. NPCs that are 51 power below the player will be highlighted in green. World bosses will match the player's power level when power exceeds the world boss's base level. This is forced enemy level scaling, which completely negates the point of having a numerical leveling system in any capacity. Lots of brilliant games do have an enemy scaling feature. The Witcher 3, Assassin's Creed Origins even has it, but these games give you the option to deactivate it, so leveling up actually gives you some form of statistical advantage. Enemy scaling is brilliant for New Game Plus, but for that first playthrough it turns it from fun to a slog, which doesn't work out in the favour of Valhalla, which can sometimes feel like a slog regardless. Now you're probably thinking 51 power ratings, that's probably quite a big difference. I wouldn't argue that it is, considering that you can start to do areas that are around 25 power ratings above your current power rating. And while you won't want to make a habit of that in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, you'll have no problems in doing so. That's the case on normal anyway. As far as I'm aware, easy didn't actually have any value in its level gating, to the point where it was just numbers on a screen that were there for the sake of being there. I can't imagine this will be too impactful on those lower difficulty playthroughs, but for those who play the game on a higher difficulty, there becomes a value in leveling up past what you're doing. And with enemy scaling on, especially for, say, NPCs now not being too vastly underleveled in comparison to you, and boss fights always leveling up to you once you exceed their level, it's going to turn what is challenging enough already into something really tedious. Perhaps more so with the boss fights than with random NPCs, as you won't really notice that difference, but in boss fights you certainly will. And there will be no point in doing more than what's necessary, because you'll get no advantage from it. But I think the biggest issue is having forced enemy level scaling just completely defeats the point of having any form of level up system, because you will never gain an advantage. So if you're going to have a feature like this, it needs to be optional. The fact that it's not just indicates that Ubisoft has no fucking clue what makes a good RPG and is just throwing elements into the game, hoping that it works. I doubt the developers themselves would make a decision like this on their own accord and go, hey, let's nerf our own leveling system just to make the game more tedious. Yeah, I reckon someone had to make it happen, but it was envisioned by the higher-ups in the company who thought there was a profit to be made here. I feel like the opening page of Anti-Consumerism 101 talks about creating a problem and then selling a solution. Are you finding the game a slog? Are you not leveling up quick enough? Do you not feel like you're leveling up quick enough? Here's an XP boost. It costs 1,000 Helix credits, which works out at about, I don't know, £8.99. I just find it very curious that Ubisoft dismantled the effect on having a leveling system in the same stroke that they decided to add an XP boost to the store, which is really quite amusing when it's not even creating a problem and selling a solution. It's creating a problem and then selling a fake solution. Either way, you're essentially asking players to pay to play less of your game. If that's a successful business model, what does it say about the game? But the stupidity of selling an XP booster in a single player game no less aside, it still doesn't give you any actual advantage barring leveling up quicker. Leveling up past where you need to has no point, and you level up in good time in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And the patch notes mention nothing about reducing the XP you get from every single thing that you do, so I presume that's the same. But the fact that leveling up doesn't actually give you any advantage anymore once you get to that level threshold, with that XP boost now for sale, it's going to manipulate players into thinking that they're at a disadvantage, and that XP boost will help, so they'll buy it regardless of whether or not it does anything beyond save them time. And what time are you really going to save when boss fights will match your power level, when enemies won't be too vastly underleveled by comparison to you, all in a system that's forced rather than in enemy scaling that you can activate or deactivate depending on what kind of challenge you want, which is much more reasonable. And also, why try to sell a redundant microtransaction alongside it? It's there as a time saver, and what attitude do you need to have towards your own game to think that players playing it without this are wasting their time? I think you get what I'm trying to say. I just don't fucking understand. One of the things I praised Assassin's Creed Valhalla for in my review is being far better balanced than Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which is now a redundant point because from here on out the balancing system is complete artificial nonsense. And to make matters worse, I can find no logical explanation as to why it's there other than to push the microtransactions. And I also find it so suspicious that this stuff is added in well after the reviews have come out. Surely that's for a reason. I think if anything, bullshit like this reminds me as to why I don't believe Assassin's Creed should be an RPG, and why I think that Ubisoft has no business making RPGs, because they see it as a means to make tedious, grindy games that push microtransactions. The developers, the people who actually make the game, I'm certain they care. They don't deserve to be hearing this right now, but I have to call out corporate shenanigans, especially when they're at the expense of fun. It's a massive shame because there's a lot to like about Assassin's Creed Valhalla. The game was honestly better without having an XP boost on the Helix store. It was better without having forced enemy scaling. Sure, it wasn't perfect, but this is not an improvement, this is a downgrade. The balancing system has been nerfed to push this microtransaction, and that's the only logical conclusion I can come to. When it was just gear packs and cosmetic items and other stuff you don't need on the Helix store, I was fine with it. I didn't agree with it, but it was fine. I could ignore it. But now, thanks to this update, there's a system in the game that has been nerfed to make that XP boost seem a little bit more appealing to players. Maybe I've got it all wrong. I doubt I have, but this is how I see it. Be sure to let me know what you think down in the comments section. After all, that's what it's there for. But that concludes this video because I honestly have nothing more to say. Whether or not you understand my point is completely fine. I don't think it matters too much. In the end of the day, it's just a video game. But I'll always be distrusting and cautious of microtransactions and will encourage everyone else to be the same way. But that's enough of me forcing my opinion on you. My opinion that could save you money. Whatever. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends and all that wonderful stuff. That would be fantastic. And with any luck, I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point. But until next time, take care and goodbye.